You found it. Your home for the best content on your favorite team, the Fighting Tigers of LSU. Do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel. Leave your comments below. And be sure to smash that like button. Yes, I'll pick LSU this week. I don't know. I mean, I felt a lot different about it 5 weeks ago than I do right now. Chris Lee, VandySports.com. Chris, how are you, man?
Doing well, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Always our pleasure. Before you came on, I said I am singularly happy for Vanderbilt's success this year, and it's the singular as for you. For a guy who covers Vanderbilt for as long as you have, you deserve this season, Chris. Yeah, so I'm happy for you. How do you feel?
I feel like you kind of get a little glimpse of how everybody else lives. I mean, I don't get tied up in the outcomes of games. You got to do it professionally. I don't sit in front of the TV and scream and throw things, but it is a lot more fun when you're covering something interesting. And, the coaches you cover are in a little better mood. The media relations people are in a little bit better mood. And, you've got something to write other than they got blown out again, which was all I wrote a year ago. So that's been nice.
I'm teasing with you.
Listen, I know. Yeah.
Give me a vibe check, Chris. I mean, they're 6-4, but this 6-4 for Vanderbilt feels dramatically different than LSU's 6-4. So what's it like in Nashville right now?
I think from the Alabama game on, there's just been a buzz around the program that hasn't gone away. And you saw it start to come a little bit to a screeching halt against South Carolina. I mean, they got beaten by a better team. It was a bad matchup. I think you can see that they were kind of running on fumes that game, and I think the bye week was nice. But, they haven't had a winning season since 2013 season, and they played in a bowl game that actually stretched to 2014, and then James Franklin left them after that game. And they've been to a couple of bowls since, but they've not had a winning season. And I think especially after the Auburn game, that got them bowl eligible. Like, okay, that's something they've not done in a while. And excuse me as I move away from the barking dog.
Oh, you're good. You're good.
But
that's just life, man. It happens.
Yeah, but anyway, I think the next thing is just to get that seventh win. I don't think at this point people care how it comes or when it comes. But obviously it came at LSU. That's not something they do often, to beat LSU anywhere, anytime, anywhere. If they beat Tennessee, that's got its own significance. It could really have its own significance. If Tennessee's on the verge of playoff, which it should be, barring something crazy against UTEP. But even then, you go win a bowl game. I don't care who you beat. You're 7-6, and that's not something that happens a lot. So I think really, since they beat Alabama and since they beat Auburn, they're in position to do things they haven't done in a while. And, just the feeling that you actually have a shot anymore. And Matt, it's different now with NIL and the portal. And part of the story is that they have rebuilt with guys that they found in the portal, and that they're players there, and they've got some money to spend. So all of a sudden the feeling of, and you probably heard it, Paul Feinbaum said before the season, they had the conversation. They won their last SEC game, and I thought, it's an interesting question with the way where the landscape is headed, but it feels like now it's gone from that to suddenly, hey, we've got a chance to maybe compete this year and beyond.
Chris Lee's with us, VandySports.com. I want to talk about how they got the roster to this point, but let me ask first, because you did touch on something about how they ran out of fumes against South Carolina. Listen, I was on Vanderbilt in that game. I thought that was a classic case of people still looking at the logo on the helmet and not the team. Why Vanderbilt was a home underdog in that game, and I was wrong. South Carolina went and ran right over them. What happened in that game?
If you watched the Auburn game, you could see them running out of fumes. Like the way that they beat teams, and even this happened against Texas. Diego Pavia scores their first touchdown on a 3rd and 17, and he goes for 18 or whatever it was. And like they would make plays like that just at the right time to beat teams. First drive of the game, you see him try to get outside on one of those 3rd and 6 type things, and it just felt like he was running quicksand. And then they tried to get the ball to Cedric Alexander to let him do some things. Their tailback is good, not great. And he just didn't look like he had any burst. And you're just going, okay, if they're going to win this one today, it's got to be their defense. And their defense has played much better and basically won them the Auburn game. Pavia had to make 2 or 3 plays. They didn't complete a pass second or third quarter in that game, which was a bad sign. And then they make the plays at the end. And some of it may have just been Auburn not knowing how to beat anybody right now. But it was what it was. And I just saw that and I thought, if he doesn't have the burst that he's had to break these plays, I don't know what else they've got left. And then you throw them up against a super athletic and talented front seven that's just littered with NFL players. And, then their defense got tired. Rocket Sanders kind of ran them over. It's one of those days that, I think if they played again with a couple weeks rest, it's not that lopsided. I think South Carolina wins, but I think it was a combo of a bad opponent on a bad day.
Did you expect Pavia to be as good as he has been?
No. In fact, I got beat around a little bit by our audience because we go to practice and they just couldn't move the ball. I just thought this is going to be one of those years where it could get really ugly. Maybe the defense wins them some games. And, there's always things you got in the back of your head, right? First of all, it's fall camp, and so he's taking reps, and sometimes he's doing it with a third-team right tackle who's not going to play or whatever. But it just never looked really good for any long period of time. Now, you go back and think about it. The defense probably had a pretty good idea of what they're running, which every week they play teams that aren't used to seeing it. And so I think as soon as they flipped the switch and played somebody else, it changed. I think he's also, to be fair, his reputation as being one of those kids who, when the lights come on, it's game time. He takes his level of performance up a couple of notches. That was out there too, but it's one thing to do that in New Mexico State. It's another thing to do it in the SEC. It's hard to believe it completely till you see it. But starting with that Virginia Tech game, you could see it.
Chris Lee's with us, VandySports.com. Pavia has gotten all the headlines, rightfully so. So he's a Davey O'Brien and Maxwell semifinalist. I mean, he's brought Vanderbilt to a level I don't think any of us thought they could be, certainly not this year. But you mentioned some of the hits in the portal. Where else did they go in the portal, Chris, to find impact guys that have contributed to Vanderbilt being bowl eligible and having a real feeling like they can come into Baton Rouge and win this weekend?
Well, they've got 3 starting offensive linemen that they got in the portal. None of them are stars, but they're better than what they had. And they're really old guys. I think you've got maybe a 5th-year guy, a 6th-year guy, and I can't think of what the other guy is, but I think he's in that range too. You've got a tight end in Eli Stowers who's really, really good. I think a top 5 tight end in the country. I would think he's going to get drafted in the top 4 or 5 rounds coming up in the spring. He played with Pavia at New Mexico State, so there's familiarity. He was a top 100 recruit out of high school, signed with A&M as a quarterback. So I think those are some of the big ones. But, we don't spend any time talking about special teams, and their special teams are really, really good. You're seeing the punter they had last year down there in New Orleans, Matt Hayball. They got a kid who replaced him. I thought, there's no way this kid's going to be as good as what they lost. And he's not, but he's really close. He's probably going to be one of the better punters in the country at year's end. They've got, and these aren't transfers, but they got a field goal kicker who's, I think, missed 1 kick in 2 months. He hit 5 from over 50. They've got a punt returner who's really good. Both those guys aren't in the portal, but they've got some little pieces here and there that you might not notice, but have really made a splash and upgraded their talent and has really helped them get there.
Chris, specifically on Saturday night against LSU, which side of the ball, just with what you know outside looking at LSU and then obviously what Vanderbilt's been able to do this year, which side of the ball do you think is more equipped for Vanderbilt to have success? Is it Vanderbilt's offense or defense?
It's hard for me to answer without knowing which LSU I get, because I thought that team I saw a month ago was really good, had a chance to get to playoffs. They gave up, 7 sacks or whatever it was last week. I don't think anybody had that on their radar. I mean, I'm not saying they quit, and I didn't get to see a lot of the game, But to me, when you are that far off your level of performance, when nobody can get to your quarterback, that begs some questions. I'm just really interested in, like, how interested is LSU in being there? Because if they're not, they can get beat for sure. But I think, the defense has gotten better. They found a pass rush in spurts. I wouldn't have even thought to say that's a spot that they could maybe make some plays against LSU. But if their pass pro isn't better, then they could force a fumble or two. They could pick off a pass or two. And I think the big thing is you just get Pavia healthy and you get that burst back. He can give anybody problems. I think, it feels like if they are more back to full health, their offense, when they are clicking, can give anybody problems. That feels like the right answer. But again, I'm not quite sure what they're getting on the other line of scrimmage on Saturday night. Where
do you think Vanderbilt, fully healthy Vanderbilt, where are they most vulnerable?
Well, I mean, their offense, they've been under 300 yards total offense the last 4 SEC games. That's one thing. They just have not been able to mount much of a rushing offense outside of Pavia. So, you think maybe with the week off, they get him healthier, they get Alexander healthier. Maybe there's a burst there you haven't seen in a while. I think their defense has been vulnerable in spots. They've not been, like, really bad consistently against the run or the pass, but you've seen spots where it showed up. Like Rocket Sanders had a field day against him. Nate Noel at Missouri had a field day against him. Hadn't been a lot of big rushing games in between, but there's been spurts where teams found something and exposed it, and they paid for it. Long passing plays have been an issue for them at times, although less of an issue lately other than maybe the Texas game. I don't know that there's been like a common thread of like a place where they have spun leaks, but you have seen it like when teams can figure out, hey, we can run against them. Their defensive linemen are not Georgia's. You do occasionally see an opponent that's able to just kind of fixate on something, and they may not have the talent to stop it of the team that's doing it to them.
Hey, Chris, before you go, what is Clark Lea's blueprint in this game? If they get to the 7th win and win in Baton Rouge, how do they think it looks?
I think it looks like pretty much all the other games they've won. I think they average 62 snaps on offense. They average 61 on defense. I think that's the lowest total snap in the league. They're going to run that play clock down to 2 or whatever before every snap. I think that's one thing that's been a common theme with them. I think the other thing is turnover margin. I think all the SEC games they've won, they've either been plus in turnovers or been break even at the worst. I don't think they've been negative and won a game yet. So I would say that and really good special teams play. Like, do they hit a couple of field goals? Do they pin a team at a punt at the 2 or something like that? Those are all things that when they're winning and it's going right, that they usually do in games that they win.
He's Chris Lee, VandySports.com. Check it out there. Vanderbilt comes into Baton Rouge for the first time since 2009. Be interesting to say the least. Chris, we appreciate the time as always, man. Have a great one.
Hey, thanks, Matt.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact. And be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.